Hey all, today I want to give a basic overview and a demonstration of granular synthesis. Granular synthesis is a method of synthesis where sounds are broken down into very short grains and then reorganized to form new sounds. Whether you know it or not, you've probably heard granular synthesis because it's used in a lot of sound design, including procedural sound design for video games. So what we're doing is we're taking very short snippets of sound and putting them back together. The metaphor I always use is about the beach. When you go to the beach, there are tons and tons of grains of sand. You know that because they get in your shoes and everything. Maybe I'm the only one who wears shoes at the beach. But when we look out at the beach, we don't perceive the individual grains of sand, we perceive the beach, how everything has come together. And this is the same idea with granular synthesis. So, for example, let's say you're playing a racing game and your car screeches around a curve. Okay, let's think about what the sound designer did for that. That sound designer doesn't know how long your tire should be screeching. They could make audio files for a short screech, a medium length screech, and a long screech and just hope that that fits. Or they could use granular synthesis to take a split second of a tire screech sound and then layer the grains on top of each other to extend that sound effect for as long as necessary. Of course, there are tons of musical examples of this too, as well as more and more hardware synthesizers that are exploring it. Today, I want to show a couple of examples in Kyma. The reason for that is it's straightforward in Kyma. I can accomplish this with a single Kyma sound. There is a granular synth module in Reactor, and at least there used to be a ready-made macro too. And of course, you can program your own granular synths in a variety of environments, including Max MSP and Pure Data, which I kind of did in a previous video. Now, that said, to get back to why I'm doing it in Kyma, I remember when I was a student, I spent weeks making this max patch that had tons of objects that would allow me to do a simple kind of granular synthesis. And I brought this to my teacher proud of all this work I had done. And then he showed me in Kyma how he could put the same thing together in 2 seconds. Final thought before we dig in, granular synthesis can also be processor heavy because sometimes you want to play back tons and tons of these little grains, these little samples. That's another reason why Kyma, with its dedicated hardware processor, can be an effective way to work with granular synthesis. As always, if you don't have Kyma, if you don't do Kyma, that's not our primary concern here. Our primary concern is understanding the concept of granular synthesis, and Kyma is just going to be our tool for looking at that. I have 2 Kyma sounds here that I'm going to use to explain things. Let's start with this GrainCloud. So these 2 things are a GrainCloud and a SampleCloud. This GrainCloud kind of works a little bit like a wavetable synthesizer. We're going to give it a waveform. In this case, we can see this waveform is set to a sine. In the case of our SampleCloud, we're actually going to be building our grains from an existing sample, a longer sample. For example, we can take a vocal sample and take moments of time in that, but we'll get back to that in just a sec. I'm not going to go through absolutely everything here, but let's think about what's important. So again, we're going to be making a larger sound out of very short sounds, and those short sounds are going to be just sine waves. We can change this to something else in a moment, but let's do that. So if we're going to make this cloud of short sounds, we need to think about a few things. The envelope of those sounds. So this is the amplitude envelope that those sounds are going to have. So again, starting from silence, fade in, quick fade out. Well, okay, how long is that envelope going to be? That's going to be set by the grain duration. I could use cycles per grain here instead, but let's do it with time here. Now, the way that Kyma works, all of these things with exclamation marks are hot variables. I think maybe the hot variables is the old-fashioned way to say it. I'll put in a subtitle here if it's new. But let me just start by maybe playing this. Okay. Let's set this to a frequency. That's controlling our frequency there. It's rather quiet. I'm going to give us a little bit more juice. And one way that I can do that is turning up this amp low here. There we go. Adjusting my mixer a bit to get these levels right. There we go. Okay. Turn down the density. And now we can hear those little individual grains of sound popping in and out. Now, Keep in mind this grain duration is set to be seconds, so each of those grains is 0.5 seconds, so it goes through that amplitude envelope, that Gaussian envelope as it's called there, right? Over the course of 0.5 seconds. Okay, neat. But one of the things that makes granular synthesis so neat is we can introduce a little bit of what in Kyma here they're calling jitter, a little bit of randomness. And we can introduce that to these various parameters. So for example, we already have a little bit of jitter in the duration. So maybe just to clean this up a little bit. Okay, so here's the frequency. Here's the jitter of the frequency, which is currently set to 0. A little bit of this is going to go a long way. Let's see how we do. So now each of those individual grains has a slightly different frequency. Okay, let's crank up this density. Let's turn this jitter back to 0. 0.01. It's almost like a little vibrato in there, huh? I mean, even at 0.3 it gets significant. Okay, well, let's get serious. Let's bring it back down to that 0.01 for a second. Now, I believe I'm recording in stereo today. This PanJitter is the left-right pan. So our pan is set at 0.5. This is the center in this terms. And so now everything should be the center because I've got it at 0. Let's crank it up. And so now we have a stereo image of these grains going back and forth. Maybe I'll add a hair more here. Bring this density back down so we can focus on individual grains again. Duration jitters all the way down. Let's turn this up to 1 second. And now we can add a little bit of randomness to that. So each of those grains is going to be a slightly different length. So it's a bit hard to hear, but those are slightly different. Sine waves are great. Let's do something more interesting. Saw21, I don't know why that's outside of the folder, but we'll do that. All right, Sawtooth Wave GrainCloud. Give it a bit of juice. A little bit of frequency jitter. It's pretty neat. Now, a couple things I didn't talk about here. Max grains. So this is the maximum number of grains it can play simultaneously. So the fewer you have here, the less computational power it's going to take. When I build this on my own in Max MSP or Pure Data, I really feel these max grains because I'm usually making one grain generator for each grain I want to produce. So you really see it multiply out. So 28 is quite a few. You could do far fewer here and still have an effect. And then the last thing here is the seed. Again, we've got random things going on. And so if we have a seed set, those random things will happen the same way each time. So if I play this, I like what it sounds like, I can remember what the seed is. Or if I want to make two and I want to make sure that they're not doing the exact same thing, I can give them different seeds. All right, that's all well and good, but let's jump over to the fun part, which is the SampleCloud. Not that that wasn't fun, but let's get even more fun. Okay, so we have an audio file in here.
Silvia, rimembri ancora quel tempo di tua vita mortale, quando beltà splendea negli occhi tuoi ridenti e fuggitivi, e tu, lieta e pensosa, il limitare di gioventù salivi.
Okay, and so this is just the sort of default sample that's in there. Of course, I can load up my own sounds there, but maybe I'll save that for just a moment. Once again, we have the grain envelope, amplitude, and we have a lot of things that are familiar. What's new here, though, is this time index and time index jitter. So before, we were just using a wavetable, right? The sine wave, the sawtooth wave, and oscillating that. Now that we're using a sample, we want to tell it where in that sample. So let's start this going. All right. I'm going to turn this down a hair. This is all fine for the moment. So here's my time index and time index jitter. Let's see what happens when I move through my time index. So now I'm sort of scrubbing through this audio. Again, a neat thing to notice, if we were going to time stretch this in the usual way, the slower we go, the lower the pitch is going to go, right? Because we're just interpolating between samples. And as you can guess, this time index jitter, or time jitter as it's abbreviated here, is going to add some random jumping around to that. Okay, that's neat. Let's set our pan is at 0.5. Let's set the PanJitter to be the maximum. I could, all right, you convinced me. I'll do a slider for that. Bang. All right. Center. And since we're not just using a wavetable now, we're not just using a consistent waveform, we really hear that panning more significantly. All right, all good fun. I always have better fun with my samples. Furby noise. This is probably gonna be loud. This is a circuit bent Furby sample. I actually used this sample and processed through Kyma in a piece I did that's out on the Seamus record label on the miniatures. Got it up on YouTube too. I'll throw in the link here. All right, let's have some fun. I'm going to do a little bit of Cappy talk here. I'm going to do I'm going to make it ramp so it goes through the length of this file. And I'm going to have it take... we won't listen to all of it. Don't worry, I'll edit this video. We'll have it take 300 seconds. So originally, there's our Furby file, right? Okay, I won't go through all of that, but originally it is 40 seconds. Oh, well, let's make that even longer than 300 seconds then. Let's make it 1,000 seconds. Again, we're not going to listen to all of this. Oh, I've made a mistake. This is a Cappy talk thing. You don't have to worry about it. But a ramp goes from 0 to 1. A full ramp goes from -1 to 1. This time index, the range of it is -1 to 1. So it's a full ramp. Again, that's for Kyma users, not for us to worry about Granular synth. Let's listen. That's kind of neat. Let's make it a little bit more dynamic here. I'm going to jump down to interpolation. In order to do that frequency jitter on SampleCloud, you need to turn on that interpolation. Let's set that frequency jitter to 0.01, just a little bit. PanJitter I liked all that. this from memory writer as if you're doing live granulation. So if you wanted to have sound coming in and then do that, you'd need to set up a memory writer too, but that's a topic for another day. Here's our SampleCloud. So again, our time index is going over 1,000 seconds. Maybe that's too boring. 500 seconds. Whoops, 500 seconds will be faster. Yeah, that's not as exciting as I thought it was. Let's do this. Now I have control of it again. That's a bit sinister. But one of the things that's really, really neat about granular synthesis is we have a lot of parameters under our control. We have a lot of parameters that we can adjust, and in the case of Kyma here, I can adjust them in real time. So when you have a lot of parameters to adjust, there's lots of opportunities for interactivity. You could control this with the accelerometer from an iPad, with a Wacom tablet, a Wiimote, whatever you could think of. Very short grain durations. Put the time index in the middle, set the jitter to be the maximum, and so now it's just picking grains from throughout that sound file. Lower density. All right, you get the idea. So what? Granular synthesis is a really neat way to take existing samples and explore different aspects of them and generate unique textures, unique instruments from a small amount of material. It takes a lot of processing power because you're taking very, very short sounds and we're playing tons of them. When I crank up the density on this, I'm playing, 28 grains at the same time. I could put that up even higher. So it's not like playing one audio file back, it's playing 28. So as you can deduce, it's going to take more computational power than just playing back a sample, or wavetable synthesis where you're cycling a waveform. That's all I got for today. Once again, you don't have to build this in Kyma. If you understand the concept, you can program it yourself in Max or PD, and there are lots of other environments where you can explore this too.